Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out here on this cold evening. My name is Chigholashvili. I'm curator here at RU, and it is my honor to present artist Aida Sulova. Aida is a multidisciplinary artist and curator who has been artist in residence here at Residency Unlimited during 2024 as part of the New York City Artist Safe Haven Residency Program, which is a coalition led by ArtistSafety.net, Artistic Freedom Initiative, and Residency Unlimited, and made possible with support from the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts. Thank you, Aida, very much for making this evening happen with us and for bringing your works and for having this discussion with me. Today culminates 1 year long residency that you've been doing here at RU. And this is also the last public program of the year that we're having. And before we continue to our discussion, I wanted to make a little introduction and actually mention that Aida and I, our paths crossed several times before we met here at RU and in New York City. I think first in Kyrgyzstan and then in Tbilisi in Georgia, and then here we are talking about a lot of topics that we've been talking about and discussing this year, and I hope we continue our discussion. But today we would like to concentrate out of this vast and big topics that we are interested in our research, and that's how we met also. And you know, we could really talk about so many things, but we decided to concentrate on aspects of personal and collective memory and symbols, and how it's reflected in your work really today. And we wanted to put it under the broader analysis and sort of like the rethinking of the Soviet past that I think is very important even today in many of the countries, in many of the post-Soviet countries, and partially, I mean, partially it is also, I would say, a big reason that why some of the things that are happening today in terms of Russian imperialism, we're still seeing coming back or going in circles. And I think the work you are doing and these kind of discussions, in a very small part maybe, but they do contribute to a very important and vital aspects, which is rethinking this last century and this, I would say, very tragic past that somehow both of our countries share. And yeah, so this is in the direction we're going to go in, but because also it's a huge geographic area that we could cover, we are going to concentrate on Central Asia and particularly Kyrgyzstan, about which Aida knows a lot. And we'll concentrate on Soviet propaganda in textiles in particular, and then how this emerged in your works. And yeah, we just cannot avoid talking about textiles, I think, whenever we meet. So I would say let's start there, and let's start by you maybe telling us what led you in your artistic work to concentrate on the topics that you're working on that we see in the works today here.
Wow, thank you, Data. I had so much, fun and joy listening to you. I wish I could just listen for the rest of the presentation, because I'm not really used to talking about my personal artwork. I'm usually on the other side of the art process, curating other people's talents and talking about other people's artwork. And here I am, with my personal artwork. I think I really need to explain maybe and tell you where I come from and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think I have an image that kind of, describes it right away. It's this one. It's me, and what they say, you don't get to choose your parents, but it also, you don't get to choose the political regime that you are born into, the country. So I was born into the communist environment, and this is the typical imagery of children in the kindergarten. They would hire the photographer who would come and stage the scene, and this is the how I would normally get my pictures taken, with the flowers, celebratory kind of setting, and always with the portrait of Lenin. So Lenin was indoctrinated in all spheres of my life. And so he became the guy, Andy Warhol of the art sphere. But here, yeah, here I am, with this kind of image that describes it right away. But also this, having the collective memory, collective property, but also collective self, and the look. I guess if you can locate me here on this picture, I'm the one with the big bow, and also understanding self not through the personal lens, but through the lens of the like other. And so that became something that I've been struggling for a long time, and even to these days, I cannot really use the pronoun I. I would always say like, oh, we, like as a collective. Like I still need to learn how to say I did this, or I earned this. So that's also me. But also I need to like really, in fact, emphasize the fact that my grandmother was a big figure in my life. So she was a seismologist. And at the same time, she was also a craft woman. So she would like do the different, schemes of earthquakes. And at the same time, do something like create something like a rug or the tapestry. So once we had an earthquake, and she just kept needing, making like the embroideries, and she'd be like, "Oh, it's fine. I designed this building, and it's not gonna, get ruined because it has a special like pillow seismic situation." So on many levels, she was a big inspiration, a powerful figure. So I was, kind of surrounded by the crafts, science, politics, and the stories of my ancestors. I also had great grandmothers and great grandfathers who would tell me stories about how the environment was used as the classroom. So it wasn't only that kind of classroom, but it's also this could also be interpreted as like the earth being your kind of the environment being as the learning environment. So. And then I could also recognize the language of propaganda because as a pioneer, something that I did not choose but had to become, I was sort of, as we say now, complicit of like, making the propaganda pieces, like creating graphic design for leaflets or for like wall hanging. So like using the red color with like very strict, very like rigid letters and slogans. So I designed this for my school because they told me that I was, really talented in it. So, and also like this imagery was like in the movies, but also I heard about it from my grandfathers. The red yurts and this kind of yurts were used as libraries or like as the community centers where you would come and kind of get enlightened by the regime, at that point communist regime. So that's where they kind of started spreading propaganda. And also this is very also important. As I said, I was, I grew up between science, the stories of my ancestors, crafts, and politics. And this is the story of the bulldozer exhibition that I heard in the kitchen in our apartment, where the exhibition of 1974 was taken outside of the gallery space because Khrushchev, the president of that time, declared the official and unofficial art. And unofficial was the kind of a filth, he called it, or something prohibited. So the unofficial art is actually a reference to the contemporary modern art. So, and torn between all of these different spheres of influence, that's kind of a product right now. The politics, science, craft, and the stories of ancestors.
Yeah, we'll come back later to the storytelling aspect and the personal memories and childhood memories that is very present in the work here. But I think it is very important for the context if we talk a little bit more about the Soviet propaganda and as it manifested in the textiles, or as it was intertwined in the textiles, right? We were saying, and we've both researched a lot about it and talked about it. And for instance, I know some cases in Georgia where I've researched more that there were, of course, like the official propaganda textiles with like very visible symbols or not so visible symbols, but sometimes there would also be textile that today we could speculate were forms of subversion or somehow opposing even what they were officially told to include in the designs or so. What was the case regarding this propaganda through textiles in Central Asian countries?
Yeah, so in my research, I'm here acting as an artist, not as like a professional anthropologist or researcher. I took it as like just my personal interest and also like remembering all the stories from my relatives. So I started I started noticing when I saw this for the first time, the red yurt, where like you come and then they think that all the wearables, all the textiles should also have a message. So I could see how the wallpapers in my apartment could also have the images of the tractor, and then the textiles of my pillowcase was also like filled with like some weird imagery. So like, and then because I was visual from the very early age, I kind of paid attention. But so now all the way, coming back here to this moment, I now think that sometimes you don't really notice these kind of things because they get like so ubiquitous. So yeah, this is one of the examples, that's from Turkmenistan, embroider. So the textile production became centralized, just like so many other things in the Soviet Union. And so sometimes it was a state order. So making art was actually part of the state order. So it wasn't like a free form of expression. And so since they decided that all the canvases should be filled with the message, so that became kind of like a very convenient way to incorporate your doctrine. So even things like one of the first Soviet projects was the building of railway, the Turksip. It's actually a very famous film as well, just like Bronenосец Potemkin, or A Man with the Video Camera by Dziga Vertov. So the Turksip is the 5-year plan where they promised you a happiness and progress. And the regime at that time actually declared the whole nation kind of uncivilized. So as part of the civilizing mission, they decided that they want to build a railroad, including using the force of the locals. So that's why there is also this juxtaposition of camels and the train, the arrival of a train. I think it's a very well-known imagery like here as well in this culture, like the arrival of a train. And you will also see it in the textile. So basically you wear a dress with that message. The one on the right is the famous Karakum chocolate. And it's also using that very like colonial orientalist image as a juxtaposition between the camel and the bull. I mean what's the word of this? The car. So it just became such a big part of your like everyday life that you get used to it. And then the designers and craftsmanship, the artisans, they started like using that sometimes because they wanted to make money, sometimes because it was the part of the state order, but also sometimes out of the fear of dispossession. So this is also the example of like a very intricate embroidery from Turkmenistan. It's the ties that also has the year, and the SSSR as the abbreviation for USSR. So that kind of like a few examples of the Soviet language in the textiles.
Okay. Yeah, this propaganda was the totalitarian and authoritarian Soviet symbols that are like very recognizable to a lot of people around the world today. They were very present, of course, like in public spaces, in decorative monumental arts a lot of times, everyday objects, you name them, right? And what I always found very interesting, and it was something I paid attention to last year's, was how much it started to appear. And I would say this was something that started happening maybe towards the second half of the 20th century, how it started to appear in folk arts of different places. And I'd walk in villages in Georgia, for instance, and sometimes I'd see like very famous wood carving of the balconies. And then there's, of course, like patterns that we know more. There's sometimes more unique variations, and sometimes that'd be like a star that really doesn't like make sense at it when you look at it, and then that will like you pay attention, and sometimes there might be hammer and sickle in the same manner. So I found that like fascinating how it even made it through the folk art, so to speak, which is also there's a rich tradition of it in Central Asia. And then we have the examples, or like your artwork today, and the example that we started to call the Soviet artifact, where we're projecting the video as well, is I think like representation of this on its most absurd level, to be honest. So I was thinking if you could maybe tell us more about those Tushkis textiles, in like traditionally what they are, and then how like the ones that you discovered. And I'm still amazed that you actually managed to get one, and we have that one here to look at.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few of these artifacts, but also propaganda in textile is such a vast project, theme to explore. And also propaganda is not only relevant to like the Soviet regime, but also, from like French Revolution to Brexit. But even now, like during the election, campaign here was also like the textiles filled with propaganda as well. But I think for today, I've only shown like 3 examples. But what I would want to kind of talk about today is the Tushkis pieces, like those, that one and this one that I created. So Tushkis is usually a wall hanging in the yard made by a woman for her daughter to commemorate the marriage. And so that kind of became a language of the blessing and how you encode all your wishes, all your blessings, and we call it bata. How you do it on like regularly every day, stitch after each. So each stitch would be kind of an encodes to your daughter, so that when she gets married, she takes it with her to a different yurt or to her apartment, and whenever she feels lonely, she would be surrounded by this warmth and messages from her mom. So we've had, when I was growing up, we've had a few pieces of tushkis in our place, but because of the modernization, we didn't put it in our apartments because we thought that we should put carpets instead. Yeah, this is the typical frame, the typical form of tushkis, which is which has the triangle sometimes inside, and it's the kind of a shape of a tumar, the blessing charm. And this is how you would normally take picture of it, and like in the yurt, like when you get inside, remember I showed the red yurt. When you get inside, so the interior is actually like almost the 80% of the interior is fabric, is made out of textile. It's a handmade embroideries or the patchwork, the wooden trunk. And so there's like a big tradition in the DNA of the Central Asians to like produce the textiles of that sort. So every single stitch or every single element or the image is even the names of it is just so poetic, like the dancing girl, or like the cloud in the sky, or like the lonely flower. So it's just like when you read the names of these emblems, it just like takes you like elsewhere. But also the symbols, the symbols of fertility, happiness, peace. So I kind of reappropriated this form and the medium and created my own sort of kind of propaganda. But I also want to share how Soviet propaganda also invaded the crafts of tushkis. So for example, this one has the Kremlin on both sides as kind of a controlling pillars. The pillars that control the narrative. So, and then the sickle and hammer and the ruby star. So like from tushkis to tushkis, you would like start kind of noticing that these elements started to pop up and women would just like incorporate them in their encoded messages. And I've asked a few women, like, why would that appear, like, instead of just like this dancing flowers, And as I mentioned, it was sometimes as a sign of loyalty or a sign of fear of dispossession, and like for example, this one, this is the close-up that says the proletarians of all countries unites. And usually there is an embroidery of the year and also the name of the woman who actually made it. I don't have my name on it yet because I'm still kind of working on it. But yeah, this is the typical form. And sometimes it would have like 15 emblems of 15 republics. And Data, you notice there's one for you, for your country, yes. For Georgia, the one on the that side, which is right side of my side, the one with grapes. But there's also, an abundance of colonial visual language. For example, the cotton. There's a lot of it here because we all know, like, Uzbekistan was like once the entire nation was turned into a cotton plantation. And so Uzbekistan was not really allowed to diversify in terms of their agriculture. So that's why there is a problem with Aral Sea, which is, disappearing. And, the labor and so many other, really big, serious issues. So it's just, it just became, as I said, ubiquitous, something you cannot really escape because it's the state order, but also loyalty and fear. It's just, like I mentioned, it has a beautiful language as well, You know how they say there's no sex in the Soviet Union, but they also say there's no love in the Soviet Union, and sometimes the love is being represented by the swans, and we would have like the wooden trunks, and the trunks would normally have the two swans and the heart. And as a child, I would always like touch it just because I just kind of, for me, that was the kind of the visual representation of love, this one. So I just kept it because it just gave me like so many, warm memories. The close-ups of that tapestry of that tushkis, you could clearly see here the wheat, the rise of the sun, but also the cotton balls as well. And obviously Kremlin with, pigeons, with birds. So.
Thank you. And this one, this is still work in progress, as you mentioned, the one that is inspired somehow by that one, but all the other tushkis. And you said, I remember that normally it would be made by a mother to her daughter. And this one you are making to yourself.
Yeah.
What are you going to write on it?
So to me, I noticed, I said it's not anthropological, but I kind of did feel it was anthropological, but I didn't go to the field. I actually went inward. I went inside to kind of explore what actually happened to me while I was growing up during the fall of the Soviet Union. So these are the things that I've experienced, but it also, I also know that these are the experiences that can relate to the rest of the country, and there were at least 300 million people out there. And I know the Soviet Union collapsed, but then the people stayed there, and people who actually have so many stories. So basically my project is about a big story through the small lens, through like my personal lens. So I did, I took the deep dive in actually, all the symbols and emblems that happened to me. So I made a series of drawings of my everyday objects that I've used as the part of being kind of brought up in the post-communist regime. And most of these objects were the objects of cleaning, of household items, because I remembered how cleaning was a sign of decency. You have to really prove that you're a decent citizen by just cleaning like this all the time. So it's mopping and using rag to clean the floor. And I know that many mothers to these days, they say things like, oh, why you are sitting? You need to clean. Like clean, you know? And when you clean, this is where you show your contribution to the development of society and show your like common obedience. And also, you know, I have like acorn that we had to pick because of it was part of the school structure activity, but also the to feed the pigs. You know, like as a school, you were supposed to pick them. Then I had podorozhnik, which is the plants, and this is our CVS. You know, whenever you get a scar, you cut yourself, you just put it on your, you know, wound, and then it's gonna heal you. Or you know, the laundry pieces, and also I keep hearing a lot like the scarcity mentality, you know. And obviously here you have to like pick the berries and use the meat grinder to make jars filled of preserves. And you do it during entire summertime, so that during the winter time you really enjoy it, you know. So it was a lot of repetition and production, picking, grinding, always nonstop. So that repetition kind of inspired me with my stitches, but also with video, with like everything I do. It's all this kind of repetitive like mode. Even like every loop, every stitch is a repetitive kind of mode as a sign of like proving you're doing something, you know.
This is what I also wanted to ask about the circles. And I mean, obviously there's reference to those over there in circles, but then this very mundane, very everyday childhood memories that you called, they're like patterns of symbols and tools of oppression in a way for you. And you put it in this kaleidoscopic view, right? Like you repeat them as if like they turn. And I was like, I've been like thinking a lot about this topic of circularity and repetition a lot also in my work recently. And somehow, I mean, other than that reference, I was wondering if that also has connection to you symbolically or metaphorically to, you know, like in a way, repetition of history, because oftentimes we're just saying we're collectively just going in circles and barely anything changes. So I was wondering if that's a reference to that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I have like 15 of those, just like those 15 republics, and my first inspiration was that, but also like every single universe, as I call them, is a story. So it's basically a story from below, but it's a story about the, as I said, about the grandeur history. And when I started working on this, I created my kind of, you know, layout of the different situations that, you know, that I've been through, like the Soviet playground, which is like a very dangerous place to be, you know, or like playing with ants, you know, being closer to the nature, not as kind of, now that I read about it, that, you know, reunification with nature or like indigenous knowledge, the power of it. But to me, it was kind of a thing that came as a default. Like I grew up like doing that, and now I'm reading about it in the books. So, but circularity is the, like, it's also like a big part of like my, you know, upbringing, like going in circle all the time, and yeah, repeat. And also with every single stitch, it's also the like processing, you know, it's part of the processing. Like, okay, it happened, but then what again? So I started kind of working with my drawings and tried to kind of incorporate them in my embroidery. But the reason I did also these repetitions is also because I thought that everything in my childhood was ugly, very brutalist, very like dangerous. And while I was a child, in my mind, the only way to beautify things is when you put it in kaleidoscope. So I would imagine I'm looking at the world through kaleidoscope, and everything suddenly becomes beautiful, you know. And I don't know why I'm still having that, but so basically I put all my, you know, like heating device or like my shvabras, like my, you know, mops and bucket and rug, I put it in the kaleidoscope just to kind of create a pattern like that. So yeah, and then that became kind of my visual language of like Bruce Lee, you know, with his jump, and then the cleaning devices. So they all became like my universes because that's how I, grew up. And yeah, it's also like other like inspired by Turkcip pattern, like that's everything based on lies, because we've been promised a progress, and like the famous poster Turkcip, with this pattern of the like construction road. So I used that, and also the pattern, the traditional one is called the stomach of the dog. I'm telling you, like all the names of the patterns are so like poetic and like funny, but also, yeah, so I used all of these. And yeah, and I guess I also now put all my work into the metal. So I work with textiles and also with metal, and I make my embroideries in metal using the welding device. So I'm spending a lot of time in the metal shop now. So this is actually the work. Metal shop actually made me understand that there's no like female and male, labor production. That everything is just out there for everyone. So I don't do these divisions anymore.
Speaking of labor, and like you have a lot of the topics in your universes is about labor, but also how much work is it to make something like that we're seeing, and how much work was it to make it this far for you?
I was very privileged, obviously, with all the resources that I had. I had electricity, I had a warm place, I had fabric, I had stores, I had so many devices that I would wear to just ease the process. I had a transfer paper that would transfer my drawings onto the textiles. And I would always think about the artisans and women who were making this in the yurt where there was no electricity. Like, how would they do that? And I've asked some, people around, and I heard stories like, oh, we've used, when the milk gets dry, they use like this yogurt as like the chalk, and that would use them to transfer their designs. Sometimes they just are so improvisational, they would just like, go for it. That's why I'm like so privileged and having like so many resources to do that. But even with those, things, half of my body is kind of paralyzed because it's like a lot of work. It's just, I lost all my nails and my fingers. Like, it's just every day I would wake up with like, oh my God, it's just unbearable. But even like this is not as intricate. And obviously this work is not about like how your stitch is like, amazingly like sophisticated. It's not that. But I keep looking at this, and I have in my collection some other tushkis, and I just get amazed how like it's so like labor intensive, and like how they would just get like so like detailed. And one of the interviews that I've watched about the woman making this, she would be like, well, I wake up, I start stitching, and then I go to bed like at like 9, 10. So it was 9 to 5 like kind of thing that we just do. But then it's so funny that it's still to these days is not regarded as labor. It's just like, oh, just a woman gets bored and then she does embroidery, which is very stupid. But yeah, it is a political act. It is about the labor. It's very liberating, but it's a labor.
Well, I hope you get some rest and your arm will.
Well, I'm still working at this, but also there's no a lot of visual information and documentation because there was no culture of self-documenting at some point, and I don't know why. And also, I never documented myself, and also never documented, never registered the time and hours. So I kind of decided to kind of go like just like them. And I don't know how many hours I spent and sleepless nights and cries and how many times I abandoned it. But still, it's work in progress, and it's not as this one.
But it's almost there.
Yeah.
This one. Well, it looks already good, and it's very interesting, and I'm curious to see how it is with the additional piece. And I'm still curious what you will write from Aida to Aida. Would be the text?
With love, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in applauding Aida. And we can open the floor to some questions if you have. If anyone in the online audience has questions, please write them in the chat and we will make it sound in the room.
I actually have a really kind of silly question, but is there any possibility to make the kind of stitch work as a collective, as a woman collective, not just from one person?
Yes, for sure. But it was sometimes a collective experience as well. But even embroidery is not the only medium. There's also felt production that also made like as a family kind of setting. So one would clean the wool, the other one would just like beat it, the other one like make the thread. And with this one, I'm not like really aware of like how many like people would just make it. But yes, it could be a collective experience as well.
Just had two questions. First question is we're seeing the use of the color red. Is it connecting to symbolism of betrothal or symbolism of propaganda, Soviet Union?
Yeah, so it's funny, we discussed it this morning as well, but red was way before, it was like part of the culture, but it wasn't, I know it could be like the first kind of interpretation could be like influence of the Soviet regime, but it's not really. So if you like, I saw so many images from archive, how women would dress, and so the white and the red was always there.
Okay, right. And then the second question I had was back to the tushki that had the two Kremlin on the side. I went to notice that there was two small rockets that are coming onto the Kremlins as well. Do you know if that's supposed to symbolize something like
Oh yeah, I
space
think
race or-
yeah. I mean, the general kind of show-off situation would be the Gagarin and his flight to the space, and obviously there was an arms race, but also resource race. Who is number one for like cotton production, or who is number one in goes to the space. So I guess it was just celebratory.
More questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed a lot of your talk, so if you've already covered this, just say so. But I'm very interested in the function of movement in the video, kind of in relation to pattern and the sort of static, symmetrical quality of a lot of the motifs.
Yeah, it also has the soundtrack, which is like very kind of sounds maybe like awkward. I mean, weird at the very beginning, but it's very also like personal. And I'm telling here, I'm sharing the story of like my personal kind of experience, not as a researcher. And I'm using the soundtrack of Twin Peaks because my father. When he like lost the job and the country like fell apart and everything just broke, and there was like no way to sustain your life, so he would like go and take the VHS of Twin Peaks and like watch it and think about two questions. First, how to feed your children, and second, who killed Laura Palmer. Yeah, in a way it kind of helped him to sustain his psychic, but yeah, that was the soundtrack of the fall of the Soviet Union to many actually. But also the movement is just like I was mentioning, like creating my own universes in like kaleidoscopic manner, like just like moving things around because static was in a way to like very controlling. Just like I mentioned, my first recognition of self was so many years apart from like this moment. Like it took me more than I think 20 years to start using I as like the pronoun, But here it was just collective self, and to me, movement is kind of it's like a sign of development, I would say.
More questions? Anything in the online audience? Yes, please.
I
think I was wondering, should I start or not? Because probably we should like go into a deep discussion on this. Because I'm also coming from one of these countries. I didn't grow up in one. Like it was free already, but I grew up with the leftovers of it. So it's Lithuania. We were also part of Soviet Union. And but basically, I have this. Maybe it's more of a comment because I'm also in my PhD and I'm also writing about the late socialist period in Lithuania through the lenses of women. So I'm looking for this gendered apparatuses of biopolitics. Looking at the small city, which I also kind of look at the Twin Peaks scenario in a way that this little small town can tell a lot about micro things. And I also going to reflect on that little town, so I don't want to like, and I'm Lithuanian experiences, so I don't want to push it to Kyrgyzstan or Georgia or whatever. But writing from a gender perspective and also taking the leftist lenses, I find it's hard sometimes when it's just put on as a communist regime, you know, because I think this is also capitalist regime on us, and what we call propaganda or not, there is a capitalist propaganda which is happening every day. And for example, this photo, this is exactly what I wanted. Maybe this is where I started to think about it, because this is your grandma, right? And I think just it's very important to understand all the horrible things that the Soviet Union brought to our countries, but it also shows very nicely in this photo that it allowed the woman in that time being in that kind of position, giving you also possibility for science, arts, and technology, because before in those countries, especially in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, it would not have been possible at all, because a lot of people were also uneducated and illiterate, if I would say like that. So there are a lot of like possibilities for the woman, especially for the woman. I'm not talking about men now, but maybe for the woman, in the gender question was brought in a way by a propaganda of Soviet Union, of taking everyone equally because they needed a labor force, right? But I think it's kind of important to mention that and also situate it in that kind of political context.
Yeah, I think it's also important to know like there's also another part of it is how actually the feminism came about in that part of the world as a physical and violent act, actually, like the unveiling. Unveiling was it was a physical act. It was about oh, you have to take this off because now you're a liberated woman. So that's how it started. And so it's like, yeah, it is a deeper discussion and conversation, but it's
There's definitely a very important point, and I think again it's very important what I also mentioned in the beginning. There's like, it's so diverse and the context is so different in every country, and there's so many different perspectives we can look through, and the gender perspective being one of them, of course, very important. And if I may bring an example from Georgia that I know well, would be a research that artist Nino Chigholashvili, to stay also within the textile topic here, did when I was working at the Silk Museum, where she was researching and started to collect biographies of women who were leading artists in textile production, in the Soviet textile production, to also bring their biographies and show and it was very different in different decades, in different 5 years. It was also different and changing, and in different countries, I would say the situation differed. Because, for instance, in Georgia, before the Soviet Union in 1918, when we gained independence, the constitution that we made was actually allowing women to participate in the parliament, which at that time was a huge achievement. And then it didn't really come with the Soviet Union, so to speak, So it's, of course, it is very complex, but indeed very important to bring up the complexities like that come up. And we can only cover so much in one presentation and then, concentrate on textiles. And in this particular case, Kyrgyzstan and Aida's work. But thank you. Any more questions, or shall we go around to see the embroideries up close and talk with Aida that way? Thank you very much,
okay.
Aida.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, everyone.